Welcome to Age Pension, Super and Retirement. I am your host Yvonne, and remember this is information and opinion only and never personal advice. Today we are looking at the assets test and the sweet spot, and I am also excited to announce that we will be discussing 3 questions from our Facebook group members. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Thanks, Yvonne. It's good to be here again.
Now let's get started. Rebecca, what actually is the assets test for the age pension?
Okay, so age pension is means tested in Australia. When you apply for age pension, you need to declare all the assets that you own. And that helps Centrelink to determine, firstly, are you eligible for some age pension? Are your total assets low enough that you can get some? And then what rate of age pension are they going to pay you? So broadly speaking, the more you have in assets, the lower the rate of pension that you're eligible for. And there is a cutoff level where if you have assets over this amount, you will not be eligible for any pension, or your rate would be 0, so they won't grant it. If you have no assets at all, you would be granted the maximum rate of age pension. And then there's an asset-free area where you can have some assets without affecting your pension payment at all. There is an assets test and also an income test. So Centrelink always assess you on both the assets test and the income test, and they work out what rate you would be eligible for based on the asset test and what rate based on the income test. And whichever of those rates is lower, that's what they will pay you. So today we're focusing on the asset test. We've talked about the income test in a different episode, because assets you can use to support yourself. So if you have money in the bank or you have money in a super fund, that's your money that you can use to support your own living expenses. The more you have, the less the government needs to pay to sustain you. So some assets that they will look at, your super funds. Some people have more than one. So anything you have in super, once you're over 67, is accessible for Centrelink purposes. But super, for a lot of people, is the biggest financial asset they have. And so when people are talking about age pension assets, sometimes people get the impression that super is the only asset that Centrelink are interested in, but it's not. There's lots of other types of assets. So any money you have in a bank account, in a term deposit, in shares, all of those are also assessed for age pension purposes. Some people have an investment property that's included as an asset. Some people have a second home, a holiday home that they're not renting out. So it's not really an investment property, but it's still considered an asset for Centrelink purposes. Or maybe you have a second home that you are letting a family member live in for free. You own it, you're not using it to generate income, but it is an asset of yours and it's going to be counted in the asset test. Some other things that people maybe don't think about as assets, but they are included for Centrelink purposes, are the contents of your home. So your furniture, your books, your TV, whatever you've got in your home. Now, they don't have a very high value, and Centrelink's usually happy with you saying $5,000 or $10,000 for the whole household contents, but it must be recorded on there as part of your assets. If you really needed to, you could sell a couch and get some cash. You could sell a spare bed and get some cash. And another thing is your vehicles. So your car, your caravan, maybe you've got a boat or a motorbike. All of those vehicles are counted as assets for Centrelink purposes, even though you're not using them to generate income. But if you got into a pinch and you had to sell it, you could and get some money for it. So you do need to list those assets as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's really helpful. And I'm curious, what assets are not counted? We could perhaps say they're in fact legally hidden from the assets test.
Yeah, so there are a few things that Centrelink don't ask you to declare, don't ask you to tell them about. So the most important one is the home that you live in. So your own home, the principal place of residence, is an exempt asset for Centrelink purposes. So it doesn't matter what value your home has. You could be living in a little unit in a regional town that's worth 200,000, or you could be living in a beautiful big home in the middle of Melbourne that's worth $4 million. It doesn't matter for Centrelink purposes. They are all just your home, and the value is exempt from the asset test. They do not ask you the value of your home. So that is helpful if you're trying to get on the pension. One strategy is to upgrade your home. I'm definitely not recommending this, that you spend money on a more expensive home in order to get on age pension, but some people do it. You probably spend a lot in stamp duty and moving costs to do that, but it is a possibility. But if you need work done around your home, if you need new carpets or a new kitchen, you can spend money to renovate your home, and the upgrade in value of your home is not captured by Centrelink. It doesn't matter. It's just your home. Some other things that aren't counted. Centrelink allows you to have a funeral bond or prepay your funeral. Funeral bonds up to $15,500 per person are exempt from the asset test. You do need to declare that to Centrelink if you have one and record the value of it, because if it's more than that limit, they will assess the excess amount as an asset. But yeah, you can put a significant amount of money into a funeral bond, and that's not counted by Centrelink as an asset. If you have a partner that's under 67 years old, the superannuation that they have in accumulation phase is not counted as an asset. So super has lots of different rules, but for Centrelink purposes, if you've got a partner that's, let's say they're younger than 60, they have some super, they're under 60, so they're not allowed to access that money. So for Centrelink purposes, you don't have that money, you don't have access to it, and it can't be considered part of your assets. If your partner's in the age of like 60 to 67, they could be accessing their super, but this is where you sort of have a choice. You can choose to either have your super in accumulation mode where you're not accessing it, and then it would not be counted for Centrelink purposes, or you could have it in pension phase where you are drawing a regular amount from it, and then it would be counted as an asset for Centrelink purposes. So that's one common strategy. If you're a couple and one of you is under 67, it's possible to keep money in the younger person's accumulation fund and keep it away from Centrelink's eyes until you turn 67, till that partner turns 67. So that's a common strategy that people use to reduce their assessable assets. In terms of the pension asset test, once your assets are over the minimum amount, or sort of the asset-free area, the reduction in your pension it's a pretty big bite out of your pension. So it's $3 reduction in a combined pension for every $1,000 over the asset-free area. So for a single, it's $3 per thousand of assets. For a couple, it's $1.50 each. So if only one of you's on pension, it's a lesser reduction, but if you're both on a pension, then it's $3 per fortnight for every $1,000 over the asset-free threshold.
That is really helpful and good to know. Thank you, Rebecca. As of August 2025, what are the limits for receiving the full age pension?
So there's different limits depending on whether you're single or partnered, and depending on whether you are a homeowner or not a homeowner. So I'll talk about, so for homeowners, the assets you can have up to receive a full pension. For singles, it's $321,500, and for couples, it's $481,500. So assets up to that amount, remembering that does not include the value of your home, assets up to that amount, you will receive the full rate of pension. If your assets are over that amount, your pension will be reduced.
Fantastic. And again, as of August 2025, what is the upper limit of getting just $1 of the age pension?
So for single homeowners, the upper limit is $704,500, and for couples who own a home, it's $1,059,000. So those limits are quite high, really, that it does allow for having a pretty good amount in super and other investments to be able to draw on to supplement the age pension. But yeah, if you have over that amount in assets, you will receive no age pension. For people who don't own their own home, the limits are higher because they sort of as a compensation for not having a place of your own that you can live in with no housing costs for most people. So if you don't own a home, for singles, the asset limit is currently $962,500. And for couples living together, that limit is $1,317,000. If you do not own your home, you have a higher asset limit. And those limits would be higher still if you are eligible for rent assistance. So if you are paying rent, private rent to a real estate agent, or if you are living with family and paying them board or lodgings to live with them, you would be eligible for some rent assistance from Centrelink. And being eligible for rent assistance means your overall rate of pension is higher, which means the cut-off limit is also higher. And it's not a set amount because it depends on exactly how much rent you pay and how much rent assistance you'd be eligible for. But if you are eligible for rent assistance, those asset limits would be a bit higher. Just a reminder you can't just go off the numbers that we say in the podcast or that you see on the website. There's always a little bit more nuance involved. So it's helpful to actually apply for a pension if you think, I'm just over that limit, but maybe Centrelink would look at it a bit differently. Put the claim in and see what they say.
That's really helpful, Rebecca. And can I ask, when do these limits change?
Yeah, so the asset-free area, so those lower limits where you can have a bit of assets before the pension starts to reduce. So those limits are indexed on the 1st of July each year. So that goes up once a year. The upper limit goes up 3 times a year. So it goes up in July when the lower limit increases, and so therefore the higher limit increases by the same dollar amount. And then in March and September each year, the pension amount is indexed. So the full pension rate goes up, which means that the asset limit, the cutoff level, also goes up in 20th of March and 20th of September each year. So that means there's 3 times a year when the asset limit for pension will increase. So that means that if you aren't eligible now, you're using up some of your assets to be a self-funded retiree, at some point your assets might go slightly down and the asset limit for pension goes slightly up 3 times a year. So there should become a point where you qualify for age pension if your assets are not too far over the limit.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm curious, do I need to tell Centrelink if, for example, my super balance has changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you apply for pension, you'll tell Centrelink what all the asset balances or your super balances are as of that date. But we know that super is not a fixed amount. It goes up and down. It goes up when the market's doing well, it goes down when the market's not doing well. It also goes down when you draw money out of it. So those values will change. Centrelink does automatically update the balances of your pension accounts in super twice a year. So you don't have to worry too much about those ones. That will automatically be data matched from your super fund to Centrelink. If you have other accounts that you are drawing money from or adding money to, it's good practice to update those, say every 6 months or maybe every 12 months if they're not changing much. And if you've made a big purchase, say you've booked a holiday, you've paid several $1,000s for a holiday, or you've done some renovations to your home and you've used up some money, it's good practice to update those values with Centrelink because your assets then are going down and your fortnightly pension rate can go up. Centrelink don't track it minute by minute. It's up to you to update when your balance reduces. We had in February this year the super funds all sent their data over to Centrelink saying for most people that their super accounts had gone up from the 6 months prior, so with a lot of growth in super over that time. But then in February, March, we had a lot of the stock exchange values went down. A lot of people saw their super balances go down quite dramatically. And the number that they were seeing in their super fund was different to what Centrelink had captured in the last update. So that was an opportunity for people to contact Centrelink and say, you've got this figure, my actual figure is $20,000 lower, let's update that so my pension rate can be adjusted. So you can update your values for your assets when they change by $2,000 or more, and it just helps you to get the right rate of pension. It's up to you to be on the ball with that. Sometimes we see people who haven't updated Centrelink in years, and the balances that they have on file are widely different to what is actually the amount that you've got today. It's good practice to update on a regular basis what your values are.
That's really helpful, Rebecca. Thank you. Could you please touch on the concept of the sweet spot?
The sweet spot. This is an interesting one. So in newspapers and media and things, they'll often talk about the sweet spot, which is kind of like the optimum amount that you would have invested in super to maximise your total income, to maximise your age pension and also the super drawdown. Now, I don't really like the way people talk about the sweet spot because I feel like it gives a wrong impression. It kind of gives this impression that the sweet spot amount is the best amount to have in super. Whereas I think it's common sense that the more money that you have, the better off that you're going to be. If you have $2 million in super, you're going to be better off than someone who has $400,000 in super. You can make more choices, you have a lot more freedom to do what you want and not really worry about what rates Centrelink is paying you. So what's termed the sweet spot is typically that the asset-free area for Centrelink purposes, that amount where you are getting the maximum rate of age pension, but you also have some money in super. So for a couple, that's that $481,000 figure. And you'll see charts put on websites showing how if you had $481,000 in super, drawing at 5%, you get income from super, you get your maximum rate age pension, and you're getting a pretty good income each year in total to live off. And then it will compare to a couple who has $900,000 in super and they're getting much less age pension, they're getting more as a super drawdown, and they're trying to compare and say that a person with more money in super has less income overall. But what they're not telling you is that the 5% drawdown, which is the minimum drawdown for people aged 65 to 74, it's just the minimum drawdown. There is no rule that says you can't take more. So if you have more money in super, you can just draw more money from it, and then you will have a higher income. So, I don't really like the sweet spot concept. I think everyone needs to figure out for themselves what the sweet spot is for their personal circumstances. And for some people, that will be looking at that 481,000 amount. And for some people, their sweet spot is going to be higher or it's going to be lower. Another reason I don't like it is that it's trying to say that it's a disincentive for people to save more money for their own retirement. And I don't really think it's about that. I think the more money that you can save, the better. You're going to have more options to have a nicer home, to go on nicer holidays, to give money to family and friends. And you're going to be better off if you are self-funding versus relying on the government pension.
That is really helpful, Rebecca. Thank you. Remember, everyone, that this is information and opinion only, not personal advice. And now we're going to go into a new section where we choose some questions from our Facebook group from Age, Pension, Super and Retirement. Now remember, this is information and opinion only, so for all the Hildas, Brians and Lucies in the world, this is for no one in particular. Let's get started. Hilda asks, I'm nearly 67 and looking at age pension. I have a home worth $900,000 and have $250,000 in other assets. I'm thinking of moving interstate. Should I sell and buy interstate or rent out my house for extra income and pay rent where I live?
Okay, so this is obviously a big decision to make, thinking about moving interstate. I'm not going to answer whether Hilda should or shouldn't move or whether she should and shouldn't sell, but just looking at the Centrelink implications of that decision. So if Hilda was to stay where she is in her own home, she would be looking at getting the max rate of age pension, so $1,150 a fortnight, assuming she's not working. If she leaves and moves interstate and rents a house interstate, she would be able to still receive some age pension for the first 12 months because you're allowed to leave your home for up to 12 months and keep it as an exempt asset. And then Hilda could rent it out. The rental income would need to be reported to Centrelink and it would reduce her rate of age pension, but she would have a bit of age pension and her rental income to be able to cover her expenses living in the new location. Also, she would not be eligible for rent assistance because she is considered a homeowner and her home, where she was previously living, is considered an exempt asset. After 12 months, the previous home would be counted as an asset, and because her total assets would be over that $960,000 threshold, her age pension would stop. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe she's happy to do that and to use the rental income plus her super to fund her lifestyle. But if she was going to move for more than 12 months, she would lose age pension. If she sold her home and bought a new one, then she would be able to stay on age pension. So that's just looking at the Centrelink implications of what she decides to do. Be a good idea to get some financial advice, real estate advice as to what she could do.
That's really helpful, Rebecca. Thank you. Now, Brian asks, do you have to specify the year, make and model of your car when applying for the age pension, or just estimate without giving details?
Yeah, that's a good question. On the form for age pension, whether you do a paper form or online, you do have to list each vehicle that you own, and you do have to list the make and model and a year. It's just so that Centrelink can see, is this a reasonable estimate of the value of the vehicle? Remember, you're not listing the price you paid for the vehicle, and you're not listing the price that it's insured for. You are listing the price that is fair market value for the vehicle if you needed to sell it this week. So a dealer trade-in value is a good one, or there's the Red Book, and like the lower end of the scale of the Red Book values would be a good one to put in. Now, if Centrelink disagrees with the value that you've put for your car, they'll just give you a call and say, hey, how did you come to this value? We don't think it's right. And then you can say, oh yeah, that's probably a mistake, and you put in a new value. So there's not really any harm in putting a reasonable value in. You don't have to overvalue your car. And another important thing here is that we know that cars depreciate over time. If you buy a new car, it costs you $80,000 to buy it. After you've driven it home, it's not worth $80,000 anymore. No one's going to pay you $80,000 for it. So just driving it home from the dealership, it's losing a bit of value. And after 6 months, after 12 months, that car is not going to be worth as much as what you paid for it. So for your vehicles, caravan, boat, cars, it's a good idea to go in once a year and update the value of your vehicle on your Centrelink record. Centrelink does not do that for you. it's up to you to update those values.
Fantastic, Rebecca. Now, our last question is from Lucy, an interesting one here. My elderly dad is on a part-age pension. Sometimes he runs out of money, so I give him signatory access to my bank account. Should he ever need it? So it's my bank account and my money. Does Dad need to list this on pension forms asking about his bank accounts?
That's a really good question too. So Lucy's being very generous to her dad, and like that's such a nice thing to be able to do. Because it's not his money, it's not his bank account, he does not need to declare it as his asset. So Lucy is gifting her dad some money, and gifts from family members, even if they're regular, do not need to be declared to Centrelink. So it's not going to affect his age pension. So that's a really lovely thing that you can do for an elderly family member, if you have the means to do it, is to, give them some money, let them use your money. And that's what Lucy's doing. It does not affect his age pension at all. If Lucy herself was on a pension or a Centrelink payment, then there would be implications there because she is gifting money to her dad. But we'll just assume that she's not on a pension or a Centrelink payment herself. She has the means to give her dad money, and it's not counted as his income or his asset. So it's perfectly fine.
That was so interesting, and thank you so much for unpacking all those questions, Rebecca. Remember, everyone, this is always information and opinion only. And for our international listeners who want to join the Age Pension, Super and Retirement Facebook group, our code word is RED. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for spending this time with us so that we can all understand the assets test and the sweet spot. And I look forward to hearing you answer a few more Facebook group member questions in the future.
Not a problem, Yvonne. It's been a pleasure.